What are you doing all dressed up?
The Oscars are today. Want to watch with me?
Sure, but I don't get why you're so fancy. You're not even leaving the house.
So what? Hollywood is practically coming to me.
You know this entire thing is a marketing stunt, right? It's all about selling you on watching films and idolizing celebrities and paying silly amounts of money for clothes meant to make you feel like you're included.
So is that a no on watching with me?
Fine. Pass the popcorn.
I would start this video out by declaring that it is award show season, but realistically, it was award show season for like the past 3 months, and I just live under a rock. Regardless, the media has been full of celebrities walking red carpets in interesting clothing, and as someone who lives under a rock, I want to know why? Why has this become such a big deal? Why and how in the history of fashion did red carpets become a cultural institution? Usually, if you were to ask me how much I care about celebrity culture, film awards shows, or even 21st century designer fashion, my answer would be, I don't. I don't care which famous person may or may not be making eyes at which other famous person. I watch movies based on whether I think I'll like them, and I don't really look to modern mainstream designers for inspiration. I can't deny that red carpet fashion is a thing which seems to be endlessly written about and discussed and oohed and awed over. It's just not my thing. But you know what will get me curious about nearly any topic? Combining social anthropology with pretty dresses. How did red carpet fashion become such a thing? Why do we talk about it so much? Not just the dresses, but what seems like trying to read the details of someone's life like we're looking at tarot cards instead of a dress. This video got a little long and intense, even by my standards, which is hilarious that before a few weeks ago, this was a topic I cared not a whit for. But we do love a research hole here in SnappyDragon Studios, and boy, did I get one. I want to name Elizabeth Castaldo Lunden's book, Fashion on the Red Carpet, as one of my most important sources. It's a bit dry, but also incredibly comprehensive. Other citations will pop up in text in the corners, and if you want a full annotated bibliography, including my snarky commentary on said citations, please do join the SnappyDragon Patreon for that and other shiny bonuses. You can— and subscribe! I was about to tell them, you cut me off!
Last time you said it was my job now.
I'm not sure you're the most convincing.
You got audience growth data to back that up?
Seriously? You're gonna make me go get the analytics now? We're on camera!
Fine. But I want to see the numbers later.
Anyways. The first known reference to a red carpet as a symbol of status comes from the Oresteia, an ancient Greek poem by Aeschylus in the 5th century BCE. The king Agamemnon comes home from the Trojan War, and his wife welcomes him, saying, "Make haste, carpet his way with crimson tapestries." Whether this refers to a red carpet as we understand it is debatable, given that translations often struggle with specific historical perceptions of color. It might have been Tyrian purple. It might have been robes or other textiles rather than carpet as we think of it. But the idea of the red carpet is what's become culturally significant. It's quite ironic that it became a symbol of status in the modern era, because the red carpet is foreshadowing Agamemnon's doom. He thinks stepping on such expensive cloth would be hubris and upset the gods, but his wife convinces him to do it anyways. And then she finds out he's taken a mistress and murders him in a bathtub. So, yeah, that's definitely a thing we want to make reference to when important people are walking into an event.
That's kind of true, though, if you think about how celebrities are treated by the media.
When did you start getting all academic?
Literally exactly when you did.
Well, hold it for now. We're not at that part of the video yet.
Fine.
Regardless of this irony, red carpets were used regularly as a status symbol in the 19th century, although mostly in a political context for dignitaries and diplomats and the like. America's attitude towards the 19th century red carpet called back to a sort of old world formalized social status and order, which wasn't explicitly present in the US. Nobody had noble titles here, even though class differences were alive and well. It was also sometimes used for travelers of a particular status, like first-class ticket holders on trains. It still symbolized luxury and status, but in a more culturally American way, suggesting that this status was available to anyone if they had the money to pay for it. But in the beginnings of the golden age of cinema, theater owner Sid Grauman had the idea to borrow the notion of a premiere from live performances and make it into a huge event for the first showing of a film, with the actors and other celebrities in attendance. The silent film Douglas Fairbanks in Robin Hood premiered in 1922 at Grauman's Egyptian Theater, and Grauman did use a red carpet in front of the venue, thus beginning the tradition of Hollywood stars walking on a red carpet on their way into events. Sid Grauman's theaters were far from unproblematic, but we'd need a whole other video to get into why Orientalism is popular and also bad. So I'll put some further reading in the description and leave it there for now. It's hard to say if Sid Grauman intended the red carpet entrances to become such an event in themselves. Stars under the early Hollywood studio system were much more employees of a particular production company than freelancers, like many are today. And the studio basically owned their entire professional life and public image. They were much less in the public eye when not acting on camera, so a premiere entrance was a rare opportunity to see them. Clothes are one of the most outwardly visible things about when a person gets glimpsed from a distance or captured in a photograph, and they symbolize so much, from budget to culture to individual personality. Just think about how much thought you would put into dressing for a formal event. However, as film premieres and public appearances became an established element of stardom and Hollywood celebrity culture, the studios who controlled the actors' public images engaged with them in this sphere too. Under that studio model, the people who we would today call costume designers for the films themselves were interchangeably called costume and fashion designers, and they worked for the entire studio rather than just on the film. It was common for them to design, and for their staff to make, the clothes that actors wore to premieres and to the new category of red carpet appearances for a variety of reasons. Yes, they controlled the actors' public images on screen and off, but the clothes would often come from the studio's costume collection or be made in-house for the actor's wardrobe. It was just another way for the studio to market itself and its product, the films it produced. Even into the 1950s, when the studio model was breaking down, Marilyn Monroe appeared at the Oscars in a dress borrowed from Fox's costume department, worn by another actress in a film she herself was not in. Alternately, a designer might work for a studio, build a name for themselves, leave the studio to run their own fashion house, but keep the celebrity clients they'd built relationships with during their studio time. Paris was considered the capital of fashion and the greatest determiner of what was stylish in the early 20th century, and dressing Hollywood stars was a major way for the American fashion industry to break into the design space. Premieres provided an opportunity to set trends through sheer public visibility, rather than the old world model of designing for high status clients and keeping fashion more exclusive to the elite. A designer that became known for dressing Hollywood stars, whether in a studio or in their own name, could then market similar designs for mass production, or license their name to a ready-to-wear collection, available to ordinary wearers. From the inception of the Hollywood red carpet, clothes were a part of the advertising, whether it was a studio marketing its films, or a designer marketing their fashion line. And when public figures do marketing, things get interesting. A lot of the effectiveness around having a public figure like a Hollywood store endorse or advertise a product is the idea that the celebrity uses the product themselves and the endorsement is genuine. Paid endorsements were much older than Hollywood. We have 19th century ones from Queen Victoria. It's one thing for a celebrity to appear in the marketing of a campaign. Even if the celebrity's endorsement is genuine, the viewer knows on some level they're looking at an ad. Red carpet fashion choices muddy those waters a bit. Especially today, but we'll get to that later. Someone looking at a premiere photo didn't necessarily have access to the decision-making process about the star whose clothing choices they're considering. Was it the star's own wardrobe? Or the studio's? Did the star choose for themselves, based on their own personality, or is their image being designed for them? Were they paid to wear something and provide exposure or status to whoever designed it? Not only would this not be explained, it would often be intentionally obscured to make the endorsement seem more genuine and thus more effective. This sort of thing is probably very familiar to you as a YouTube video, as are the disclosures that developed in the wake of the explosion of celebrity marketing in the early 20th century. Every time you hear a YouTuber say, "This video is sponsored by so-and-so," that's to follow FCC or equivalent non-American regulations, so you know we're being paid to talk about whatever the thing is. Red carpet fashions rarely come with such disclosures. Enter, though not by way of a red carpet, the Academy Awards, alternately known as the Oscars. The early Academy Awards were very far from the public media event we know today. They were a private industry dinner to network with other members of the Hollywood elite, and attendees weren't dressing to be seen by the public. A reporter at one point criticized the look and feel of the early Oscars, saying the glamour didn't hold up in person, and comparing the fashion and jewelry unfavorably to what old money socialites wore. The first attempt to make a media event out of the Oscars was in 1939, and it was noted that the actors looked shy during their acceptance speeches. Likewise, fashion was not considered a focus at this point. A fashion trade paper mentions it in 1940, but the great big ruckus around who wore what didn't come in until the 1950s. So, what changed? Well, first, the venue. In 1945, the Oscars moved to Sid Grauman's Chinese theater. See earlier note, Orientalism is popular and also bad, including red carpets at the venue entrance. Photographers were there to document the entrances, but it wasn't an organized or staged spectacle yet. However, they also added bleachers around the venue doors for the public to observe the entrance, and a host to narrate it for the radio broadcast and bleacher audiences. This was an early instance of Hollywood event inviting media and the public to watch an unstaged show, rather than ignoring them or passively suffering their presence. Having a host and bleachers in all of this socially codified how fans and audiences were supposed to react to seeing celebrities walk down the red carpet, with stars in their eyes, in multiple senses. The entrance ceremony increased in complexity over the next several years, growing to include interviews in the lobby. For radio audiences, this required commentary on the clothes since, well, it's radio. They couldn't see that. From 1948 to 1953, designer names were mentioned more and more in connection with the stars' outfits, in part because the end of World War II allowed a return to the international fashion trade, both in garments and in ideas. And then, another big thing changed. Television happened. In 1953, the Oscars were televised for the first time, ushering in a huge rethinking of the event's very purpose. What was left of the old Hollywood studio system was nervous about a live broadcast since they wouldn't be able to script and manage the actors' public images as tightly. But the potential to gain exposure, prestige, and sponsor funding outweighed all of that, leading to the ancestor of the show we know today. The entrance ceremony had already increased in complexity since 1945, like the addition of those lobby interviews. And with the visual aspect of television, audiences being able to see the actors' clothes was recognized as a powerful marketing tool for all sorts of things. The Oscars broadcast was marketed as a fashion show, and as a way for actors to designers to cross-promote their work, including internationally. The broadcast nature of the show was more accessible than in-person runway shows, so anyone interested could tune in and get fashion advice and inspiration, rather than fashion being restricted to those with money or connections or status. Combined with the growing legitimacy of fashion journalism in the 1950s, the fashion and beauty-related content of the Oscars show became a marketing strategy to engage female audiences, and huge amounts of PR resources were put towards it. By 1958, there was an organized press set up by the red carpet and venue entrance with specific areas for photography, reporters, and other press. This was an ideal space for fashion-focused media coverage, but the press soon insisted on having less structured access to the red carpet and the event. One of the reasons they gave was wanting to get better photos of the clothes. The process of choosing clothes didn't change immediately when the Oscars became televised, although much of it began there. Hollywood studios were still an important resource for the stars' wardrobes, even if they weren't controlling their choices anymore. As I mentioned earlier, there was that time Marilyn Monroe presented an award wearing a dress that Fox's costume department made for a different actress to wear in a different film, Valentina Cortese in The House on Telegraph Hill. This dress is particularly well known because the skirt tore right before Marilyn was meant to go on stage and needed an immediate repair on site. Although, the Oscars had former Hollywood designer Edith Head running staff in case of such an incident. Also, actors would still look to the designers they knew from film work to make their other important outfits. Helen Rose, who costumed Grace Kelly in the film High Society, also designed her 1956 Oscars dress and her wedding dress that same year. Meanwhile, Edith Head, in her capacity as the Oscars' official fashion consultant, would work with each actor to make sure the clothes looked good with the venue and decor, showed up properly on camera, and to make sure that no one wore anything too similar to another person.
What about the men? You basically can't tell them apart. They all look the same.
You're not wrong. In the first 6 decades of the 20th century, full formal menswear had very little room for variation, and just about the only difference I can see is some men had ruffles on their tuxedo shirts and some did not.
So boring.
For once, I agree entirely. But perhaps one of the most effective marketing strategies had to do with how close video media can make a viewer feel to the person on screen. Think about it. Right now, you are in your house or on the subway or wherever you watch YouTube videos, and I, someone you have likely never met, am speaking to you as you go about your day. For folks in the 1950s with television as a new technology, watching the Oscars on TV was like the ceremony entering their home, making them part of Hollywood. This sort of aspiration to luxury shows up in other uses of the ideological red carpet too, like with the first-class train tickets in the 19th century. And the Oscars broadcast was able to tap into this public desire to access Hollywood to market the show itself. That sort of connection you feel to someone you see on TV or in the media, especially when you see them being a person rather than a character in a film, is called a parasocial relationship. You feel like you know them, even though they don't know you, and you've probably never met or conversed. Parasocial relationships are an incredibly powerful force, and I would know because that is literally what we're doing right now. I don't know you, dear audience member, but you do know me, or at least the me that gets on camera to chat about fashion history. And you like me enough to watch my videos, think about what I say, and feel inspired by the clothes I make. Actors at the Oscars were and are doing similarly. In a promotional film made in 1970, Edith Head described the Oscars as the one time that an actress presents herself as her own image, not a character in the film. Through their or their publicist's choices of clothes, the actor is expressing something about their public self that audiences can see, identify with, and take inspiration from to associate with those qualities themselves. This can be anything from good taste or aesthetic ideas to political statements, and it builds personal branding, social capital, and loyalty. It also sells things, whether that thing is the actor's value and reputation, the films they appear in, or the designer name that made their outfit, or even similar clothes by other makers. Through the 1960s and 1970s, fashion as a whole experienced much more rapid and dramatic changes than during previous periods, with an increasing prevalence of subculture fashion, like the hippie movement. In parallel, both the mainstream fashion industry and Hollywood itself became increasingly corporatized and big business. The Oscars had a bit of an identity crisis, trying to decide how much to hold onto their old Hollywood glamour without seeming out of step with the modern world. By 1972, the official Oscars costume consultant position was only regulating and designing the presenters and stage performers' costumes. A different designer, Bob Mackie, was assisting with the show, but still made some attendees' outfits by personal request, such as Cher. Beyond that, it was fashion anarchy. Celebrities would do everything from shopping at department stores to these custom, one-of-a-kind commissioned outfits, and some simply didn't seem to care about the clothes. The prevalence of political statements in fashion also kicked up. Also in 1972, Jane Fonda wore a decidedly anti-glamorous, though very stylish, black pantsuit as an anti-war statement. And there was an International Ladies Garment Workers Union campaign against moving labor offshore as well. But despite the chaos, by 1975, Oscars producer Howard W. Koch said the marketing surveys showed us that people actually care more about the clothes than who wins. That year was the first in what became a long tradition of fashion industry sponsorship deals for red carpet outfits. Textile company Celanese signed on to produce the stage show costumes, offer fabrics for designers to make certain celebrities' dresses from, then sell reproductions of those dresses. This sort of marketing, using the parasocial relationship between audiences and a celebrity, is how we landed at the current state of the Oscars in fashion. In the 1980s and 90s, fashion brands formed more and more conglomerates and began using more and more lifestyle marketing to sell an image of luxury as well as their products. Putting their products on celebrities strengthened the association between these brands that made expensive ready-to-wear clothes and accessories and the image of luxury being used to sell them. To quote Linden, celebrities crystallized the role that Hollywood personalities had in representing modern beauty ideals and class performance. And through these lifestyle marketing campaigns, designer names in their capacity as brands almost became celebrities themselves. During the 90s, the official fashion consultant for the Oscars was actually the owner of a luxury boutique. Fred Heyman used his role to build up his own business and that of other high-end fashion retailers. His boutique offers dresses to borrow, which designers shipped in to be considered, and attendees were invited to visit the store to choose. He brought in Patty Fox, a designer and publicist who had been fashion director for Saks Fifth Avenue, as his assistant for the Oscars. Together, they sourced other garments from showrooms in New York and elsewhere, specifically for fashion-oriented pre-shows, building anticipation for what the attendees would wear without showing any of the actual celebrity outfits. But by 2000, stylists were taking over this role for individual actors, and Heyman was pushed out of the official position. Likewise, the Academy caught on to the success of pre-show media in general and started running their own. Now, instead of the film industry using fashion to market movies, fashion designers and brands are using movies and award shows to market fashion. When a brand puts their dresses on the red carpet, they are leveraging centuries of association with luxury and glamour and status, the visibility and status of celebrity culture, and the parasocial relationships that the audience has with a given celebrity to sell themselves. Maybe it's the dress. Maybe it's the brand or designer name as a whole. Maybe it's a certain stylistic statement. But it's still marketing and publicity, and thanks to the reputation of the Oscars, it reaches huge numbers of people. And that's the thing about the Oscars. When they were opened up to the media in 1939, it was to get publicity and make money. When they set up bleachers to watch the entrances in 1945, it was to get publicity and make money. When the award show was televised in 1953, it was to get publicity and make money. When the Oscars were marketed as a fashion show, it was to get publicity and make money. When fashion-focused red carpet coverage was added, you guessed it, it was to get publicity and make money. This is what celebrity culture and spectacle is about. And honestly, celebrity culture and the commercialized way we've been taught to see it is one of the reasons I don't usually watch the Oscars, even with all the interesting fashion content. With the involvement of these unspoken brand deals, the analysis of why someone wore a certain dress beyond they were paid to, and the downright invasive levels of scrutiny, it gets in the way, for me, of appreciating the rest of it. I mean, I run a respectable but by no means massive YouTube channel, and I still have to wrangle the consequences of running into people who recognize SnappyDragon when I'm out in public in the world as real name me trying to live my real social life. If I wasn't already pretty critical of how we see and treat celebrities, this little slice of experience would have done it. I'm not saying don't watch the Oscars or don't be into red carpet fashion, but I do think it's important to understand why the things we love or hate are the way they are. It's fun to look at wild, high-budget marketing stunts. They're entertaining and dramatic, and it's really cool to see what designers will do when they have an Oscars-level budget for their creations. They've been a platform for some extremely notable political statements, too. But we also shouldn't forget that we are looking at a marketing stunt, lest we fall headfirst into the sort of idolization that feeds Hollywood's collective problems. This has been your regularly scheduled, longer than intended tirade about old clothes. If you had fun, make sure you click the button to tell YouTube, and tell me in the comments about a favorite red carpet outfit and why you like it, whether that's pretty or political or anything else. Subscribe for more fashion history snaps, join the SnappyDragon Patreon to hang out on Discord and get those sweet, sweet source notes, and feel free to follow me around the internet at Miss SnappyDragon. Just, not in person. See you next time!
Is he going on stage naked?
Well, that's gonna make some worst dressed lists.
Worst at getting dressed lists, more like. Can you even be on a list about clothes if you're not wearing any?
Good point.
So pay your costumers better!